Hey guys, Carrie back here from How to Homeschool My Child, and today we're going to be talking about learning to read and all the struggles we have with all of that. If you're just joining us, whether you're joining us on live or if you're joining us on the replay, let me know if you're going to be reading with your kids this summer, and maybe what's the first book or maybe your favorite read aloud with your kids. Leave a comment and let's share and help each other. It'd be fun to share some good books as well. There's a new one, Green Ember. It's not that new, but it's new since I actually was homeschooling, that I'd never heard of. And people were going on and on about it. So I'm going to check it out. Actually, probably get it at the library tomorrow. So let's talk about reading. How do your kids respond? You know, I have 3 kids. Gentry is my middle daughter, loves to read, learn to read, easy, easy, easy. Ashley learned to read, but she didn't like to read. And but she would, there were certain things. If it had something to do with history or if it had something to do with science, then we were doing pretty well. Hunter, on the other hand, none of my kids actually struggled to learn to read, but getting them to read was something else. We're going to talk about both, but let's talk about that. He didn't like to read. He didn't like to listen to me read. He didn't like anything with it as a child. Now he loves to read. We share titles all the time, book titles. So why do I share that story with you? Because all 3 of my kids are readers as adults, and they are instilling in our grandchildren the love of reading. My grandkids, I know they would sit and listen to me read for an hour or two if I sat and read that long to them. They would love it, and maybe it's because they don't want to go to bed. They pull out 10 books if we let them, although one family has a limit of 3. The other family comes and goes. I think since there's 2 kids, they have to choose just 1 or 2 books each. But they all love to read. Did they all love to read growing up? No. Why tell you that story? Well, here's one thing that I would really encourage you to do as you are maybe struggling to get them to read or to learn to read. And that is, 1, just take a deep breath. Give yourself grace. Give your children grace. Give them patience and give them time. You've been reading for a lot longer than they have. I was not a reader growing up. I didn't like to read. The only reason I would read in elementary school is they had this Saltgrass Reading Award. And if you read 5 fiction books, 5 science books, and 5 biographies, you got the Saltgrass Reading Trail thing. The Saltgrass Trail whatever, the horses rode right down the interstate by my elementary school. And so it was a big deal in Houston back then. It all happened in February, so we had to read our books by February. I was competitive. I wanted to win the award. That's the reason I read my books. Maybe you have a child. Maybe you need this summer the summer reading plan at the library. I know our library does. I'm not as familiar with it, but I also know that my grandkids, they've got reading programs in their libraries, and so they can go. I know that I have taken Landry it's on Mondays, and I think Elizabeth and Faith, theirs is either on Wednesdays or Thursdays. But that is one way, is we went to the library every week. My children were exposed to books all the time. We have bookshelves in every room. Yes, even the bathroom has books in it, believe it or not. But there are bookshelves in every single room. And books were looked upon as something positive, not a drudgery. Does that mean I didn't require them to read? Yes, they had reading requirements, especially in elementary school. Well, all the way through, actually. But as far as learning to read, we needed to, you might be struggling with that. So here's what I want to do. I want to talk about a little bit about if you have a struggling reader. Then I'm going to talk about some ideas to encourage your kids to read this summer. And then in the description here, I actually have a free class. My friend Sarah Miller, she's one of our homeschool superheroes, is giving a free class on Monday night and Tuesday. I'm not sure what time on Tuesday, but you can go. And it's all about setting up a successful summer reading plan. You may not even be homeschooling in the summer. I never homeschooled in the summer. Did we quit reading? No. We read all the time. So let me tell you a few things. Let's first talk about struggling readers. I'm not going to tell you about like how to teach reading. I'm just going to give you some general ideas, and Sarah can give you some more ideas in that class. But one thing I think is really important is the books you choose to read to your children, but also that they are to read. They need to have high interest for that child, low vocabulary. If they are struggling to read, don't start picking out books that have difficult vocabulary in them. Something that your child is very interested in. Hunter was interested in Flat Stanley when he was first learning to read. So I found all the Flat Stanley books. He also was interested in water, as whatever the setting was. So we found water, like the beach back here. Another thing is, don't get complicated books. Don't get complicated books where the plot is like different times and we're shifting and we're foreshadowing. Don't do that. That is confusing to them. It needs to be very straightforward. And also pick books where the subject and the predicate are physically close together in the sentence. They don't have to figure out who's doing what with a big clause in the middle of it. Simple sentence structure until they're able to read on their own. So those are a few ideas that you can do. I also think it's important that the topics that you choose for each of your children have a connection with them. Like Hunter, don't ask me why, Flat Stanley, that was something he enjoyed, but water. So is Family Robinson. He had a connection somehow. Maybe, who knows, maybe back then it was just part of him. Because if you haven't heard my story, he's been living in Hawaii. He took a 1-year leave of absence from his corporate job. I don't think he's going back. His first client for his new business is in Hawaii. Every night he can go surfing after work. So maybe that water thing was going with him back when he was 6, 7, 8, 9 years old. Who knows? But seriously, you just never know. So pick the right books with the not complicated structures. Now, what are we going to do to help our kids in their interest of reading? And by the way, if y'all have questions, please leave them in the comment section, whether it's a replay or whether you're watching it for the first live here. This is my pet peeve, but read aloud. And keep reading aloud to your kids every day, even in the summer, even when you're not homeschooling. We read aloud at Christmas time. We would read aloud even on vacation sometimes. Read aloud and be very picky about what books you read aloud, that they're not just fluff, but they have a connection with your kids and they have a purpose. Now, when you're first starting out and they're young, find things they're interested in and read those books. That's why I was saying share some of your favorite read aloud books. Later on, I will send you a link to the page that has my kids' top 10 books that we read during homeschool. Each child has a list of their own. So read aloud. Don't stop reading aloud when they can read on their own. Just because they can read something like Homer Price doesn't mean that we need to stop reading out loud to them. And by the way, this is a really good book and we enjoyed it. Here's another book that we all enjoyed. The Lion, the Witch, and the Wardrobe. Oh, here's another one, not a water book, that Hunter absolutely loved. Anything by Howard Pyle. And he started with Robin Hood. So I think we read all of these Merry Adventures, and we read King Arthur. Those are really good books for boys as well. So read aloud. Another thing is act out the story. Maybe you're reading aloud and you let your kids act it out. Another thing is introduce them to Shakespeare, and there are the Lamb's Child's Book of Shakespeare, something by the Lamb brother and sister. And so look that up and let them act out the Shakespeare while you are reading it. Or if you have some older kids, let the older kids read the parts while your younger kids act it out. There's a lot that you can do to make it reading enjoyable. Encourage all forms of reading, just like read aloud, read silently, read the plays, take turns being different people. There's a lot of ways, and there's a lot of different kinds. Expose your children to a wide variety of books. You know, Gentry loved fiction, loved novels. She would read anything pretty much. Ashley, not so much, history. But I had to keep exposing her to different kinds of books. Hunter, same thing. Yes, he still had to read his history books and that. Because we used real books for homeschooling. We didn't go get a textbook. That's just like babying it down. All right? Choose books about his or her interests. I've already talked about that. Create a reading space. On the other side of this wall is our living room, and that is where we read out loud pretty much every day. Now, when we moved, there were times when we were in Idaho, there were times that Steve needed that living room space quiet, so we would go upstairs to my bedroom. Each of our kids, they had a place where their books were. It could have been in a basket if they were younger, or their bookshelves as they grew older. Another thing you can do is arrange your books according to age. Put all your preschool, kindergarten books in a basket so it's easy for them to get, toddler books. Now, I like my bookshelves organized by topics. That is not the best for children. Here's what you need to do. All the lower kid grades are on the bottom row. All the middle school are on the next row, and then the high school, and then the adults. Why? Because you want books that are easily accessible to your kids. So when they are bored, maybe they'll pull out a book and read it. You never know. Make connections between books and life. So if I were reading The Lion, the Witch, and the Wardrobe, not every time, but I may ask some questions about Aslan and the lion. Who do you think he's a picture of in real life? In real life, he's a picture of God. All right? The other thing you could do is Homer Price and all his donuts and everything. You could talk about donuts, connect that way. You could talk about work and the different, just some living ideas. This is what we call a living book. And when there's a living book, it connects your child to real life ideas. Another thing you can do just to see what's going on in your kids is have them tell the story back to you. All right? So we read aloud, and you don't need to do this every day, especially if they're really struggling and they don't like it. But twice a week, have them tell the story back to you. It's something called narration. You will, and don't correct them. There's no right or wrong answer. If they say the car was blue and in the real story it was yellow, don't correct them. Just let them tell the story back. This helps them to connect with the book. And the easiest way to use narration or copy work or anything is start with your read aloud books. Your kids may all be reading at different levels their own book, but we can always have narration. We can always find things of interest with our read aloud books. And so that would be something else I would encourage you. And then let your kids choose. Go to the library every single week. Let them choose. I mean, if they're only going to get one book, let them choose it. And it doesn't, I mean, obviously you don't want something bad. You don't want something that goes against your faith or anything. But you know, I will tell you, American Girl books, they weren't my favorite books. I'd much rather my girls read Little House on the Prairie or Anne of Green Gables, but I let them read it, you know, but I also connected it to real life. I wanted to know what was going on because sometimes they did not get disciplined for their wrong actions. And so we did connect those, but if they pick those out, that's fine. And then I would bring other books home so that if they needed something to read during the week, we had some other books available. So those are just a whole bunch of ideas to encourage reading, to make it fun. I want you to know that if your child truly is struggling, if they're complaining and whining about reading, you just want to go, okay, so here's another story about reading. I had a friend, actually she worked for me, and this was like 12, 15 years ago. And she said her son, I think it was lesson 12, 15, you can guess what program, sat at the table and banged his head against the table and said he wasn't going to do any more reading lessons. She completely changed the program and started using games, completely different attitude. And I think Sarah will show you some really great ideas to change that attitude and some fun ways to make reading fun so that your kids will actually enjoy it. Any questions, leave a comment. I will go find my top read aloud list and leave it here as a link. Please sign up for Sarah's class right now. You will be so happy that you did. And anyone that invests with Sarah, I will just tell you, I'll come back later this week, but I've got a special little bonus if you actually decide you want to use her reading program as well. So thanks so much for spending time with me. I am Carrie Beck with How to Homeschool My Child. Y'all have a great day.